Tuesday, June 22nd. On the agenda tonight, the continuing budget hearing. We have the Massachusetts Technical School and Fitchburg Schools. We will start with Monty Tech. Good evening, Mr. Colquhoun.
Good evening.
Would you like to comment first, or you want me to read the number?
You all have the packet that we sent up, right?
Do you have the packet that you sent up? We have the mayor's packet, which shows $1,682,344. And councilors, that coincides with page 2 of the packet we received from Monty Tech. If you look in the approved assessment for fiscal year 2011, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, it is $1,682,344, which matches the number in our budget from the mayor.
I don't really have a presentation for you. I don't want to take your time with anything that you don't want to hear, but I am prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
Comments or questions from the councilors? Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Superintendent, when we took a tour of Monty Tech last year, you had mentioned that you thought this year we might go up a little bit, and we have. Do you care to take a shot for next year?
The budget's up 1% this year. We had not gone up at all. Last year was a 0%. This year's 1%. The assessments went up 0.5%. We took the other half out of excess and deficiency, which is our E&D account, which by law is 5%. That's our stabilization fund, similar to yours. So that's where that additional 0.5% came from. Next year, between last year and last school year, which is actually this school year, and the coming school year, we've eliminated 14 positions. We eliminated certain electives. I don't know what next year is going to bring. I'm fearful of it, as I'm sure you are. There's not a lot more to cut without having impact on how many students we accept. We pretty much stayed away from things that would impact how many freshmen we could take. So that would be our trade teachers, but there will actually be a reduction of 3 trade teachers this year. So our goal obviously would be keep it as low as possible, or no increase. We went 1% this year because we were close to falling below net school spending if we had stayed at 0.
I know that we have a couple more kids going to Monty Tech from Fitchburg. We got a couple of spots there. And you had mentioned last year, too, when we took a tour of the school, about there were plans for maybe expanding. Is that kind of been put on the shelf for a while?
It's very preliminary. The school committee is, when you have 700 applications for 350 openings, there's always somebody asking about whether we should be expanding. But there's no architect hired, there's no study committee. It's just discussion among school committee.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Councilor Solomito.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Superintendent, looking on page 18, my question is one of envy on that being the health insurance for active employees, going right down health insurance, dental, life insurance for active employees, unemployment, and workman's comp. How did your health insurance stay the same? I mean, we don't seem to have that.
We have our own health insurance trust fund. I don't know if this city does or not. So we set our rates based on how healthy our trust fund is. And actually, we received no increase for our primary HMO plan this year from Blue Cross, our HMO Blue. So we had no increase in that. So with 14 less employees, that also made up any increase, because our renewal year is December. So that's, we lucked out. I don't think that's going to hold in the future. I think it was probably a one-time, because we have been experiencing 15, 16% increases in the previous years.
And then the health insurance for retired employees, that only went up $2,000, or went up $1,000. And that's, again, would that be a one-time thing? I mean, I was very envious that you could do that.
Yeah.
Very impressed, to tell you the truth.
Well, I can't really predict the future, but as the numbers of retiree, we also changed, I don't know the exact law that we enacted so that all retirees of a certain age then go on to Medicare, and so so there was savings in that. School committee did that 2 years ago, and that would be, we're just fortunate at this point that it remained the same, and it also, again, reduced, for the active employees, it was reduced number of employees. Retirees, it's a fluctuating number every year, and, if it comes up short, we'll be cutting within our own budget during the fiscal year and transferring funds into that. But
Thank you. I was very impressed, that's all. Thank you.
Counselor Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Superintendent, how many employees do you have?
Right around 200, 210, somewhere in that range.
What's the status on contracts with your teachers' union and whatnot?
We are next year will be the last year of the teacher's contract, so we anticipate that we will open by October, this coming October. Same with the custodians. Those are our only two unionized groups.
For the FY12 session?
FY12, yeah.
Okay.
So both in the last, they'll be, this start of the school year, they'll be in their last year of a 3-year contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the superintendent? Counselor Conry.
Yes, I'd just like to say, refer back to what Councilor Clark said. The council had an opportunity to tour that facility and see what the operation was like, and I don't think most people really realize what a great operation it is. Kids get a good education, neat, clean school, very tight operation, and you're to be commended for that, you and your staff. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Next, we move on to Fitchburg Public Schools. Counselors, Superintendent Ravenel is ill and could not be here with us this evening. Representing the schools will be Paula Giaquinto, the Assistant Superintendent, and Bob Jokela, the Business Manager. Also in attendance tonight are school committee members Pete Stevens, David Thibault Munoz, and School Committee Chair Mayor Lisa Wong. Ms. Giaquinto, Mr. Jokela, good evening.
Good evening.
Councilors, the number before us for the Fitchburg Public School System is $43,531,547.
Can I make an opening statement?
Absolutely.
Thank you, councilors. Superintendent Ravenel apologizes that he couldn't be with us tonight. He's not feeling well today. I guess we want to get across 3 key points right at the beginning. First, it's been our goal to maintain a comprehensive program, including music and sports, within the school district. Second, we do continue to strive to offer a core curriculum, including high school engineering and biotechnological programs. And third, to offer innovation, including an alternative high school, programs like the Savings Through Energy Management Program and Arts Pilot School. Over the last year, some of our major educational achievements have been as follows. 3 districts performed better in English language arts and math. The other 2 besides Fitchburg were Lynn and Brockton. And according to Dr. Robert Gaudet, who's with the Pioneer Institute of Policy Research, this may indicate that educators in these districts are utilizing policies and practices that are meeting the needs of their students. Fitchburg had 44 fewer dropouts over the past year, which was a 2.9% improvement from 9 to 6.1%. Governor Patrick recognized the progress, saying, "This is terrific progress. Every time a student gives up on school, we all pay the price. Congratulations to teachers and students for sticking to it." And over the past year, with the recent high school graduation, many of our students were accepted to colleges, prestigious colleges, included Stanford, Princeton, MIT, WPI, Holy Cross, Boston University, Boston College, and Tufts. As the superintendent has submitted to the school committee and the city council in each of his years with the district, again, we're presenting a balanced budget. We've had special education cost capture by increasing Medicaid reimbursements by $135,000. We've kept elementary school and middle school autism programs within the district, saving the district and the city $1.5 million in out-of-district tuition. And lastly, as an evidence of some of the innovation that we've been implementing over the last year, we entered into a royalty agreement with a major publisher on English language learners math. Some of the positives for this year and what we'll be doing this spring and this summer is investing over $300,000 in textbooks and technology at Fitchburg High School to address accreditation issues that were raised in the most recent NEASC visit. And we're also investing in updating our security systems at all our schools. The budget before you tonight does include 18 full-time equivalent reductions as follows. A middle school assistant principal, 3 elementary school teachers, 1 high school teacher, 4 special education staff, 6 middle school teacher, 1 English as a second language teacher, 1 middle school specialist, and lastly, 1 central office administrative assistant. This budget is the result of substantial reorganization, conservation, consolidation, improving efficiencies, moving business and human resources functions to a more electronic format, and innovation that we're all striving to continue to deliver continued balanced budgets. Lastly, not necessarily presented in this budget for operations, Fitchburg was selected as one of 12 communities to participate in MSBA's Green Repair Building Initiative, where the initial phase will focus on replacing 4 schools' boilers, and MSBA will reimburse the city for 80% of that investment. This year was, once again, a challenging budget. As we heard the superintendent of Monty Tech say, the challenge is continuous. This year, when you add cost increases to the what we had to face, basically we had to cut $1.8 million to meet this budget. As we look forward to FY12, it'll be another challenging year as we lose $2.5 million in stimulus funding. That money is not in this budget packet before you. Those are all grant-funded positions and costs. We hope to mitigate those losses in stimulus funding as much as possible, but the challenge to offer a comprehensive program in FY12 and beyond will be formidable.
Bob, if I could just ask clarification, total number of cuts in employees?
18 reductions.
18 reductions. And am I correct that 1 is administration and the other 17 are all teachers, special ed folks, or
One is at
teacher aides?
central office, administrative assistant at central office. The others are teachers, and there's 1 middle school assistant principal.
So 2 administrators and 16 direct.
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I'm going to be lengthy here because there's a lot to cover. Page 4, please explain central office clerical salary going up $36,000. I thought you said we were losing a position.
We are. Those were city absorbing the salary of 1 particular Title I clerical staff that had been funded 50% by Title I, and a couple other small clerical staff dollars included in that, again. But
So
their
that's-
loss of Title I funding
Okay.
the city absorbs.
Okay. Page 5, Arthur Longsdale Middle School, instructional supplies were cut by 35%. One of the big complaints I get from teachers is lack of instructional supplies, and I see across the board that we didn't really increase in each school any instructional supplies. If anything, we either cut or we kept it at level funding. I'm just curious to know, out of all of the instructional supply line items, the Longsdale Middle School had the biggest cut out of all of them. So how is the school addressing teachers needs for instructional material instead of, because I think a lot of people don't understand that in addition to that profession being grossly underpaid, they're also paying thousands of dollars a year out of their own pocket for instructional supplies. And I'm seeing cuts here on that. So how are we mitigating that? How are we mitigating that risk that they have to pay even more to service the children?
If I might, the Longjo Middle School participates in the Expanded Learning Time Grant, which is a state grant fund that is the equivalent to $1,300 per student. The majority of that fund provides remuneration for the teachers who work the additional hours. A significant portion of that fund is dedicated towards instructional materials and supplies. The feeling was that this reduction would be balanced by monies available through that grant funding. In addition, we have written a couple of significant competitive technology grants, and because part of the Longjo mission was to be a science, technology, engineering, mathematics school. And in the past year, we've installed number 4, more next year, of what we're calling 21st century classrooms. And those classrooms come with professional development for the staff, but a full suite of technology tools to enhance the standard curriculum, whiteboards, mobile slates, mobies, what we call clickers. They're actually handheld devices for assessing student performance. It's a whole variety of tools. The teachers, we have 2 classrooms at the high school, there are 3 classrooms at the middle school. And the 3 days of training just concluded in June. So the sense we had was with the additional ELT funding, the technology funds, we could support the instructional materials piece at Longjo pretty substantially, at least as long as those grant funds exist.
Okay, thank you. Page 6, Crocker. I see a $42,000 increase in kindergarten para and $46,000 increase in faculty. What are those 2 increases concerning? Page 6, Crocker.
Again, if I might, annually, we participate in a grant program called the Full Day Kindergarten Grant, and that grant partially subsidizes the salaries of full-day kindergarten teachers. It also potentially funds some or all, depending on how the grant is, the RFP is devised, the paraprofessionals. In the past, we've allocated the funds, I don't want to say randomly, but we've apportioned them out across the district at the full-day kindergarten locations. This year, and I believe the grant is, the RFP was just made available this week, it's due next Friday, we included this in the budget to ensure coverage should the grant be reduced. As I said, I just, as I was leaving this afternoon, talked to Kate Martin, and she had just received the RFP to write the grant. So I don't know if the grant will cover those subsidies as it has in the past. What we're noticing in most of our grants is that the amounts are being reduced anywhere from 5 to 25%.
Would that also apply to McKay? Because on page 8, I see the same thing.
It could very well. And those may be the locations where we applied the subsidy from the grants last year, so that without knowing we had those grants for sure, we definitely need those kindergarten teachers, and we definitely need those paras. So we would have to own the financial support to provide them if the grant didn't cover the cost.
Thank you. Page 9, Memorial, librarian. Do we currently have a half-time librarian there? And are we increasing that to full-time or 1.5 positions?
I could answer that. For the past several years, our single full-time, we had a full-time librarian at Memorial and a full-time librarian at the high school. However, they were not assigned full-time there. They were apportioned out to provide supervision to the library media paraprofessionals at the elementary schools and the other middle schools. This year, we have hired media technology paraprofessional specialists at all of our schools. I believe in this budget, we're extending those folks to a 6-hour day so that they will be in the buildings full-time. And we could pull the librarian at Memorial out of the need to support and supervise, and that librarian is now going to be full-time at Memorial, similar to the librarian at the high school being full-time. We have coverage in the libraries elsewhere.
A full-time librarian's salary is $70,000?
It's a regular, the member of the teaching staff, so
Okay.
the top staff, yes.
My other next question, and I'm sorry if you've already stated this, but I'm seeing in the Longs Joe Middle School, Crocker, McKay, Memorial, I see all these schools, Rheingold having South Street, seems like all of them, significant cuts against sped faculty. Are they positions gone, or is that another grant issue?
In some cases, those positions are gone. We have experienced a reduction, a loss in student enrollment. And we have the special ed department has reorganized. For example, the evaluation team leaders who were formerly in central office, responsible for running team meetings and communicating with parents, those folks have all moved into the schools that they serve. So in some cases, it has reduced the load for that kind of, I don't want to say management activity. They're not management people, but management activity, reducing the load on what were responsibilities for some of the teachers. So that in some cases, and I believe Mr. Jokel did say, we have 4 special education teachers reduced.
So, in addition to the 40 million plus that is received from Chapter 70 and a portion from the city, how much does the school next year anticipate right now that you'll get for grants? So you get the Chapter 70, the city portion, and then obviously you get millions in grants.
For next year, all grants total about a little over $9.5 million.
So is it safe to say that your budget would...
Those are not included in the 43, correct?
Right.
So 9.5 on top.
So it's more like 52, 53 million operating budget. And how much, Mr. Saracen, do we charge for indirect expenses to the schools? Because the 43 million or 44 million that they get, there's usually 12 or 13 million of indirect expenses.
For 2011, we're projecting around $14,300,000.
So 43 million from Chapter 70 in the city, 14 million in indirect expenses.
Right.
Which would bring that up to about 57 million, plus another 9 million in grants, so that's 67 million dollars in total. So, question I get sometimes is the school budget really 43 million? No, it's more like in the mid-60s, because the 44 comes from state and city, but there's indirect costs, and there's grant funding. And my last question and a comment is, how much money did we get last year in stimulus?
In total
For
stimulus?
fiscal year 10?
For fiscal year 10, we received a little over $2 million.
And what are we getting this year?
This year, we're getting about just under $2.8 million.
What are we going to get next year?
In FY12, 0.
Now, that is, in my opinion, the biggest concern that I have for next school year. Forget this one. Next one's going to be a disaster, in my opinion. You're going to lose $2.8 million in one-time revenue. We got $2 million this year. We're getting $2.8 next year, which is why I've always thought that this stimulus package is ridiculous, because it's a one-time source to prop up jobs, and I feel bad for the people who work in the schools because, it's just delaying something that could happen down the road. I mean, that's $2.8 million that we rely on outside that we're going to lose next year. I mean, to me, we already face a $2.8 million deficit in the schools next year because the feds figure they can Band-Aid things by just sending us money a year or two. And then after that goes, what do? So what is the school committee or the administration doing right now to mitigate that risk from happening? Because that's almost $3 million we're going to lose next year. And it's really upsetting to me because it kind of provides a shield to reality. It looks good right now and last year in terms of keeping things level, but next year, you're on your own. I mean, it's not sustainable. So what are we going to do about next year?
Well, we're already beginning to look at FY12. The superintendent announced at the last two school committee meetings that he's forming a redistricting committee to look at a variety of issues. Clearly, it's a large challenge. You have the $2.8 million just in stimulus, then you have other cost increases. So the number will easily be over $3 million. So it's something that, although FY11, we haven't really officially started it yet, we're looking at FY12. And we have to look at how we're going to try to meet the three goals of, comprehensive program, core curriculum, and innovation. And it's going to be a challenge.
I think it's a legitimate concern across the entire country.
Absolutely.
Because it's all one-time money. That's all it is.
And I guess just,
the inevitable.
well, just to be clear, the FY10 and FY11, what they call American ARRA money, American Recovery Reinvestment Act, that money was spread out over 2 years. So because of the way we utilize that funds, we actually didn't utilize half the funds this current year, FY10. So that's why our FY11 number on the ARRA number is higher. While the goals of ARRA were both reinvest or retention and investment, we are looking at those dollars to make investments necessary to make the transition to FY12 as, I'd say as smooth as possible, but as least disruptive as possible.
Well, I credit you for taking on the challenge because it's going to be a difficult one for everybody across the entire country. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Salamito.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Jokel, I'm looking at I guess to begin with, the paraprofessionals that you have, and I looked at Rheingold, Memorial, McKay, Fitchburg High, Crocker, and Longzhou, and the amount of money spent on them went up, and I'm glad they did. They went up anywhere from $8,000 to $1,000 to $24,000 to $33,000, and yet at South Street, they went down $40,000. Is there a reason why the paraprofessionals went down? I'm sure there's a reason, I just don't know.
I think
The paraprofessional dollars are all predicated, linked directly to individual student or program needs. So if most of the one-on-one students who have a full-time paraprofessional assigned to them, if one leaves the district, that position is no longer necessary. The program needs, we still maintain the 4-hour paras in the kindergartens, but our special ed classrooms have full 6-hour paras. But again, depending on the student needs, and it's all directly predicated on and linked to those specific students, so that if a student, again, leaves or moves in, the cost will go up, the cost will go down.
And I'm sure that's the reason. It just appeared as though all the schools went up and one school went down. And, I mean, was it 1 or 2 students moving out of the district that actually caused that $40,000 drop? All right. The next one in the transportation, and that's the regular transportation of students is $1.5 million. And transportation of the special education is $2,079,000. And I'm sure the transportation is from further away than the normal transportation. Is that the reason? Will we transport the sped children a farther distance?
we have both in-district and out-of-district special education transportation, and as Assistant Superintendent Giaquinto mentioned, that transportation, it may be required as part of a student's individual education plan. So there are some students who go out-of-district to out-of-district schools, specialized schools, and part of their IEP requires that they have transportation.
Is there any reimbursement to Fitchburg for that?
Yes, by way of circuit breaker.
Okay. How much of that sped $2 million do you think might come back? Even an estimate, I don't expect an exact dollar.
This is, I think, I'm trying to show, well, I don't have that number offhand.
Okay.
The reimbursement rate, I think, for circuit breaker, is it in the 30s, upper 30s, somewhere around there.
Upper
The state,
30?
that's been one of the line items at the state level that has been in a state of flux over the last year. But I think
When
the
you say
state was
30%?
30%.
Once you reach the cap, and I can't remember what that limit is,
Yeah.
$10,000 or $20,000, then there's a reimbursement for whatever the amount is above that cap. It used to be much higher. The state has come back significantly.
I couldn't find it in the budget yet, I'm sure it's in there. The amount that Fitchburg pays for school choice for our children to go out of city compared to what we bring in. Do you know what the ratio is?
Actually, that number is not in this budget.
All right. That's
I
why I
just,
didn't
I
find
can
it.
tell you that school choice coming in is around 900,000, and going out is about 1.9 million, 1.8, 1.9 million. It's
We pay-
almost 2 to 1.
2 to 1? That many more children leave Fitchburg than we bring in from other towns?
In dollars, I can't remember the numbers.
Right, but the amount of money that,
Yes.
wow. In the last one, and I read the paper about Lunenburg and other towns in having to increase a fee for sports, and I know that's always a topic brought up. Does Fitchburg charge for participation in sports?
Yes, and in fact, we increased it, I think last year we
Last year.
increased it.
One of our challenges is that, and there is a limit for the students based on, or the families based on the number of sports students participate in, but our free and reduced lunch numbers are so high that when we reduce, Mr. Cosenza has looked at this, if we increase the rate too much, the requirement for scholarships or subsidies increases as well. So there becomes a situation where we price participation out of the market. Our high school is over, closing in on 60%. 60% of the students qualify for free lunch.
60% get free lunch?
Qualify.
Qualified.
Qualify? Wow. That's unbelievable. All right, that is all I have. Okay.
Counselor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bob and Paula, and a member of the school committee members and the mayor. I first of all want to thank you for unanimously approving the anti-bullying policy at last night's meeting. The difficult part now is going to be the enforcement of that policy. And on that, I want to mention the learning resource officers, which I tend to mention every year. Those resource officers are going to be a big key to that policy. And I want to know how many learning resource officers we have now in the public school system, and who's paying for them.
We have one resource officer right now.
Actually, we have two. We have one at the high school
full-time
and
high school.
one at Long Jump.
Are they taken out of the police department's budget?
So, I know there has been discussion about cost share, but I believe, and I'm not sure how the chief does it, whether it's grants. The resource officer at Long Joe was just brought in recently.
Mr. Saracen.
Yeah, it's one officer, approximately one officer is included in the $14,300,000 for the school city-related cost. So indirectly, it's an indirect charge for one officer.
For one officer?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that there's talk about having more up there, too, which I think is important. How is the city with net school spending? Are we meeting our obligation as far as that's concerned?
Yes, we're right at the cusp. We've been making headway. We cleared a deficit in prior years, partly due to the McKay contract now being included in the cost. It's an allowable charge. It's not considered a capital lease. So since then, we've been managing to meet our net school spending.
I know that there's some wiggle room there. Are we at 100%, or are we at,
We're very close. We may have a slight $100,000 deficit maybe at the end of this year, but we hope to make it up in fiscal 11. I think we're very close.
would you agree with that, Bob? Is that,
Yeah, I mean, I work with the city in terms of the net school spending. Yeah, it's a little bit of a moving target, but yeah, we're,
I know in the past, though, that we had dueling figures.
Right.
Before your day
Right.
here. And
We're no longer
You would
talking
always,
about the
you would always
figures.
ask that question, you get
Right.
one answer, and then
Right.
the other guy would say, oh, wait a minute, I mean,
Right.
you know. So, it's nice to hear that we're on the same page anyways. And as far as Medicare reimbursement, I know that that's always been a battleground. Some mayors in the past have split it, 50% in the general fund, 50% to the schools, or all to the general fund. Medicaid reimbursement, where is that?
well, I'll tell you what the figures are, or what they appear to be for this fiscal year, and I'll defer to Mr. Saracen on how it's allocated.
Okay.
I think this year we projected, was it $726,000 or $36,000? And we met with our external consultants who help us with this, and we're on target to receive about $942,000, and I believe all those funds go to the city. I think it would have to exceed over $1 million for any to come back to the school district.
So the 942 would be for this fiscal year?
FY10.
FY,
And current first fiscal year.
and it goes in the general fund.
I'll defer to Mr. Saracen.
Yep.
And how long has it been like that?
For a while, there was an agreement agreed to by a few years ago where it stated that between the city and the schools, anything over $1.2 million in receipt would be split 50-50 between the city and the schools.
Okay.
Since that was signed, I don't believe we've reached that amount, so it's been pretty much gone in the general fund. And next year, the mayor's budget, it also includes the same projection that we used for this year, $726,000 for
And of
fiscal
that-
year 11.
And of that $942,000 for this year, about $160,000 of that was associated with ARRA. So Councilor Di Natale had talked about stimulus money. The city will indirectly be a beneficiary of that through Medicare for $160,000 this year.
Thank you.
Counselor Tran.
Where should I start? Thank you, Mr. President. For two budget seasons, and today will be the third season in a row that I have expressed to you folks that we need to either fund or increase the funding for textbooks and supplies. And I felt disappointed that you didn't listen until the state came in and denied Fitchburg High School of accreditation because the lack of textbooks and supplies to be one of the reasons. Let me put forward the comparison that I have, okay, in terms of textbooks and instructional supplies, and compare it to one of the simple line items, guidance counselor. At the Long Joe Middle School, you have $16,500 funded for last year. Now it's you decrease it to $10,000, comparing to $131,000, going up to $136,000 for guidance counselor. Crocker School, zero funding for textbooks, but you have guidance counseling for $69,000 plus. Fitchburg High School, the budget is not funding anything for textbook for this budget season, and we're funding $349,000 plus for guidance counseling, going up from $337,000. And I can go on and on and on, and I can throw out the numbers for McKay, Memorial, Rheingold, South Street Complex. They're all the same. Can you tell me, if you know this, the percentage of your budget, which is $43,531,000, the percentage of that budget that represents textbooks and instructional supplies? It's 0.007%, less than 1% of the budget. This budget does not serve the students. It doesn't.
Can I respond?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Over the last year, we've been investing money in textbooks, sometimes not exactly right off the textbook line, and Assistant Superintendent Giaquinto will talk about that briefly. One thing that we're looking at is not just textbooks, but how instructional content is delivered. So is that in the form of textbooks or supplies, or is it delivered by way of technology? Some of these, I'll call them smart boards, and Assistant Giaquinto has a more technical term for it. Clearly this year, we are, despite what the budget shows for Fitchburg High School, that it shows a cut in textbook funding. With some savings from energy that we've been able to realize this year, we are actually buying the textbooks in FY10 for FY11. In addition, we are investing about over $120,000 in textbooks up at Fitchburg High School to address, I guess, years of insufficient funding from called school budget funding. We, again, as we enter the 10th year of the 21st century, the 11th year, we're looking at how educational content is delivered. Textbooks are still a component of that, but they're not as large a component as they were years ago. With regards to individual schools, Paula, I don't know if you want to expand on that as well.
Sure. The textbook issue at the elementary level is related to the kinds of curriculum delivery that occurs. For example, in literacy, there is a core reader. In the old days, it used to be called a basal reader, but it does provide the core curriculum. And because the city budget has been so challenged, we've, again, very aggressively written grants. We have grant partnerships with an organization called Bay State Reading Initiative, and we use our Title I funds, not to supplant, because this district, the city has never been able to adequately, Councilor Tran is right, the city has never been able to adequately fund text and that kind of text support materials, but we've been able to purchase, it's in the range of $300,000 to $400,000. All of our elementary schools, every classroom, every grade, K to 4, has a research-based, standards-based core reading curriculum, including the reading materials, the intervention materials, the writing programs that provide interventions, the assessment programs, those are all standardized, and the systems for incorporating data in instruction. The math program, similarly, all of the elementary schools, K to 4, every classroom, have common core mathematics materials. They are not a textbook, they are actually small text materials and teacher manuals. At the middle school, that's more of a challenge. We've been meeting with our middle school English language arts and math folks. We're just finishing 3 days with the math folks. The math folks have common math materials. Again, they look more like small 100-page texts, but every student has 6 to 8 of them. And we're looking at standardizing the reading materials and increasing the classroom libraries. But we're doing that where these budgets do not demonstrate it. We're doing that through our grant funds and additional partnerships, such as the Expanded Learning Time Grant. And the high school, we are investing significantly. I was just there this afternoon meeting with a significant number of folks in the math department. They have reinvigorated their mathematics core textbooks. It's not a new publisher, but it's the newest editions. They have significant technology supports, videos, access to websites, CDs, so it's a huge benefit beyond the simple text. And that's some of the investment we've made at the high school with the recent purchases.
Well, textbooks is not the only line item that I'm speaking of. The numbers that I threw out at you folks represents the textbooks and instructional supplies, which you mentioned, still well under 1%. And if you add the technology that you both mentioned, it just reached 1% of a $43,531 budget. You see why I'm mad? You know, when I'm angry, I stutter. So excuse my my angerness. And I think the reason why I'm passionate is because you know that I have 2 kids in the school system. And to me, when I see the school system, I see it as an entity serving the kids. And you used the term budget challenge, a city challenge. Is it really a challenge, or is it top-heavy that making the budget a challenge? It's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer that. So we move on to page 16. Athletics. Do we have athletics in all the schools or just Fitchburg High School?
Athletic programs are primarily...
Okay. And we have a director. We have athletics, coaching, which is increasing by close to 5%. Are those the people who participate in the athletics coaching? Are those primarily people in the school system already?
Primarily, yes.
So they're getting a salary, and then on top of that, we're paying for
They're receiving a
whatever they do.
stipend that's in the contract.
And then it has a athletics clerical. Do we really need that position? We have important departments in this city that do not even have a clerical position. Yet I'm looking at an athletics department that serves only one school that has a budget for a clerical position. Has that been looked into? That
We reviewed, as I mentioned to Councilor Di Natale earlier, about looking at next year. We're constantly looking, for the last, I've been with the district for 2 years, so I can only speak to that time frame. But we're looking at all, not only schools, budgets, departments, to see what is necessary. And this was an area that we felt is necessary for next fiscal year.
Page 20, technology. We have a technology director. We have a line item, $161,000 for admin technology support. How many positions are those?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, Councilor. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Then we have the admin technology expense, contracted services. Can you elaborate on that line item?
Basically, call it web-based programs, diagnostic programs. Connect Ed is an example. When you receive a call or an email, that's contracted services. We put it under technology.
Support contracts, right. Page 19, Arts Academy. I'm not sure if you spoke on this yet, but on the faculty line item, we're increasing by 42%.
The enrollment at that school is increasing from 180 to 240 students, and the increase in their budget is strictly a function of students enrolled at the school, so that's why.
So how many positions are those?
Between 3 and 5 I was just talking to the principal today, and she's worried, depends on the configuration of students and the grade levels. I know they need an additional 5th grade teacher, an additional 6th grade teacher, an additional 8th grade teacher, whether or not they need an additional special ed teacher to service the students who come in. And then they have a part-time special subjects teacher, but because of the increase in the number of classrooms and teachers' preparation period, that person will go from part-time to full-time. So it's depending on the configuration of who the kids are and what their services are, it would, the staff would then be required to serve them.
Page 14, maintenance. I know that school committee member Sally Cragen sent out an email today, which I didn't have an opportunity to read, on the building maintenance needs. But there's a line item on the budget here under health and safety, which is new to FY11.
Actually, that was, I can't remember what line item that was supported by in last year's budget, and actually that was, I think, at $15,000 of support, where we actually shared a resource with Fitchburg State College that helped us put together a kind of a health and safety, we formed a health and safety task force, and that person has helped us with compliance and efforts to meet the goals of the Health and Safety Task Force. But this year, that number has gone down $5,000.
You know, some people look at the city budget, and they see all these layoffs, and they see all these reductions, and they said, you know, we're paying taxes, yet we're seeing our services reduce. But I'm looking at the school budget, it's worse. Year after year, it's the same. I was about to say something that I didn't want to say, but year after year, you guys put forth to the council the same budget, and it calls for either lack of funding, no funding, or reduced funding of anything that has anything to do with kids. That's how I see this budget in front of me tonight. And I hope that you walk away from this meeting, you and the school committee, take out of this meeting, and next year craft a budget that, you know, actually serve the students. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Can you justify, it's in the FY11 budget PowerPoint section. One of the questions I've had for a while that I haven't asked yet, according to the chart, it's, the title of the PowerPoint is FPS Enrollment Trend 2006 and 2009.
Yep.
It shows that our enrollment in 2006 was above 5,500 students, and in 2009 it was below 5,000, so almost a 600 student reduction, and now we're at a little over, teeny bit over 5,000. So we've lost between 500 and 600 students in the last 5 years. If we use the $43 million budget from the Chapter 70 in the city, that comes to $8,600 a student. If we use the indirect expenses, that's $11,400 a student. And if we use the grants in addition to that, it's $13,200 per student. So at a minimum, we're spending about $9,000 a student. If we're losing 600 students, just about, if you factor in those three different kinds of budgets, it's a minimum of $4.5 million reduction to a $6.6 million reduction, yet every year we're told that we're at the breaking point. Are our healthcare, electricity, and contractual obligations, both at the admin and at the teacher level, as high as that? Because that's a question I get a lot from people who ask, well, we've lost 500-600 students. Why are our costs, if not level funded, they need to be increased? My first thought is fixed costs, or health insurance or contractual obligations, but it causes a red flag for some people to see we're losing that many students, yet the costs every year either go up or we have to keep level funding or else we're going to have to reduce a lot of teachers. I mean, can someone shed light on how we make up that disparity, that you lose that many kids, but your costs are still going up? And by going up, I mean, every year you have to reduce a lot of staff or you're going to be in a big hole, yet the numbers have been going down consecutively for the last 5 years. I'm just curious to know an explanation as to how that works mathematically.
I'll try to answer some of it, and I want to just kind of correct a statement that you made in terms of factual number. The number of students this year that went out of district was 339. It was 329 last year, that I can tell you. So it's not 600. I just wanted to be clear.
Well, I was going on 2006 as
yeah,
5,500
right.
down to below 5,000.
And to put it in, actually, the larger window would actually be, over the last 10 years, it's gone from 6,200 down to about 5,000.
Okay, so
But
mathematically, how do we how's it
let
justified?
me talk about utilities as one example. Over the last, I'm going to say it's about 5 years, our utilities have gone from about 1.3 million or 1.1 million. Now they're about 2.4 million. Okay, those have been increasing every year. One of the things that we tried to do to not in this budget cycle, but last year's budget cycle, was look at our facilities. And we looked at not only how much it costs to operate, but maintain and invest in them. And I heard one of the counselors talking about Monty Tech, and their funding stream is a little bit different than the city of Fitchburg. And I think from prior visits before the council, we've heard positive comments on some of the investments we're trying to make on facilities. Well, we're at the stage now where we're trying to level off those increases as best we can with conservation, with new equipment, but those have increased over the last 4 or 5 years. Contractual raises automatically, without any, as we're in negotiations, step and columns, it's another 300, which is in this packet here. Transportation keeps increasing. We try to keep reducing the number of buses. We've gone from 40 buses, I think in 2006. We're now down to, next year we'll be having 23 buses. Okay, so at $50,000 a bus, at times 17, that's $850,000 that we've reduced. So we're trying to manage those cost increases as much as possible by other expense reductions.
Kind of emphasizes that whole point about those costs, how monumental they are every year in terms of increases, because when residents ask if we're losing students like that, but our costs stay the same or go up, that shows to me how big of a problem that is regarding health care and
Care's huge.
all that stuff, which is, why I've been very supportive of the mayor going after the state on plan design, because my only objective with that is job retention, and that is the biggest budget buster, and there's no other reason why I support that other than that, because, that's the biggest killer. So it's hard to look at the enrollment going down like this, but yet our costs stay the same or go up. It's hard to justify to people why that continues to be, when it's kind of a known fact that I'm just curious. I don't know how much do we spend on health insurance for the school portion? I know the budget this year is $12.8 million. How much of that is for school employees?
The estimate for 2010 for the active is $4.5 million, and then for the retired school teachers and city, I'm sorry, clerical employees, it's 2.3, so it's about 7.5, 7.8 million.
So
One thing to note is the
60%.
teachers, the educators, anyone with the educational background at the school department, the state pays for their retirement. That is one thing that is not in the city retirement. But we
it's-
do pay the benefits.
But it's 60% of our total healthcare expenditures is in the schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's obviously why they're the biggest piece of the puzzle in terms of getting plan design because of the current laws.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Councilors, moving on to tonight's agenda, we do have a discussion regarding the reorganization. The mayor's proposed reorganization, but before she gets to that, the mayor does have a few communications for us, some of them which are on your desk, and she'll be discussing those. Then we will get to the reorg discussion. Madam Mayor?
Great, thank you very much, Councilor Hay. I have just four things I want to go over. The first is, there is an announcement late yesterday from Governor Deval Patrick that affects the Fitchburg Housing Authority and the very tall building on Pritchard Street that you saw pretty much actually have no activity for the past few years. Before I became mayor, I don't know exactly what happened, but that project was stalled due to some issues with financing. And 3 years later, the Patrick Murray administration has made some funding available, $1.375 million in state low-income housing tax credits and $4.85 million in Department of Housing Community Development Program subsidies to get that project back on track. So that'll be 96 units. This is affordable assisted living, and 10 units will be set aside for low-income households. So I talked to the contractor, and we'll likely start seeing renewed activity maybe sometime in August timeframe. So just thought you should know that building really hasn't had any activity for the past 3 years, but it's glad to see that the financing has come together. The second thing is something that you all know about by now, but the increased bond rating, the news that we received yesterday, just wanted to thank all of you for your participation. And I also wanted to give you a little history. So as you know, the most recent news yesterday was an increase from a BBB+ to an A- status, and I thought you'd like to know that the last time that we were at an A- status was in 2005. And in 2006, we had a downgrade to a BBB+ with a negative outlook. In 2007, we were further downgraded to a BBB- with a negative outlook. And then in 2009 is when it started to go back up to a BBB+ with a stable outlook, and of course, this most recent round. So I thought you'd just like to know that 5-year history. The third item...
Mayor, if I could interrupt for 1 second, I would also like to note that Mr. Doheny, Mr. Caputi, and Mr. Saracen, in my opinion, were very important in that and should receive accolades from the council and from the residents of Fitchburg. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So, as you know, we have great employees, and it's always great when those that have to leave us can return. So, you've all received a press release on your desk. Former Fitchburg police officer returns to Fitchburg. Christopher R. Cordio will be returning here to active duty as a Fitchburg police officer as of July 1st. The paperwork went through today. We actually thought he would start a little later, but he wants to start as soon as possible. He was born here. He's a lifelong resident of Fitchburg, has a family and a home here, graduate of Fitchburg High School. He attended the Police Training Academy in March 2008. So he was one of our newest officers, was one of 4 that we were looking at laying off who transferred to Leominster and is now looking to come back. He's been there for 2 years. So he'll be starting next week, and we're very glad to have him on board.
Is that position funded in the budget, Madam Mayor?
It is mostly funded through the budget. There is enough money for him to start on July 1st due to the excess money for retirement, so it doesn't necessarily require any significant changes, but any further individual would. And the fourth is most of you have the colored sheet. It's a sheet with a lot of numbers on it. This looks different from the sheets I've given you in the past years regarding how I've looked at supplemental budgets. This is just gives you an idea of what I'm thinking about as you move forward with making your tough decisions over the next few days. The supplemental budget portion, just a sort of a draft or recommended or suggested, whatever you would like to call that, is in the green section. This is an area where I know that I haven't received, and I know that I think you're still compiling suggested cuts from the council, so this is sort of the cart before the horse, because I haven't received any word of what the council is going to do in terms of a reallocation of funds, but these are just a couple of thoughts that I've had. And what I've attempted to do here is not only to look at a fiscal year 11 supplemental budget, so this is different from previous years, but I also did a 5-year forecast, so for fiscal year 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, so that you can see what happens with changes to the budget that was presented to you. So the first section, lines 1 through 17, are the impact of supplemental budgets that might be proposed. The second section, 18 to 22, are other changes that we have anticipated in fiscal year 11. So these are things that we've anticipated, and they're embodied in the various actions and the budgets that we've put forward, but how those would impact future fiscal years. Lines 23 to 29 are other forecasted changes in 12 and 16, just things for the council to be aware of. And then there are 3 different sections that really speculate on where state aid is going to go. Your guess is as good as mine. So I looked at the worst-case scenario of state aid really doing nothing in the next 5 years. I looked at state aid returning to fiscal year 9 levels, and I looked at state aid returning to fiscal year 7 levels, but not until after 2013, just to be conservative. So a number of assumptions are going into the sheet, but this is a good start in terms of looking for the big red flags or the big funding cliffs that are in our future. For example, in fiscal year 13, we see about $1 million in stimulus funds that are currently funding police and fire. Those go away. Now, there are some rumors right now that people will be pushing to get more stimulus dollars, but I think a lot of that is going to be dependent on what happens in the federal government. If the federal government doesn't make stimulus dollars available to the state, I don't think the state is going to be passing on those fiscal dollars to the cities and towns. So there's a lot of information in here, and I know this is the first time that you've seen it, so I would like for you just to have it as an FYI and to feel free to call me or to ask me any questions, again, as you go about formulating your decision on the budget for this year. One big thing to note, if I could just leave that with you, is the discussions that I've heard have been primarily focused on the police department. There was discussions about filling the positions that would be vacant due to retirements this year. There's one position that's vacant in this fiscal year 10. That position I'm looking to fill with Chris Cordio. And there are 4 additional positions that will become vacant due to retirements in fiscal year 11. There was some statements by the council on trying to fill those positions through the budget. I had asked the council to allow me to do some negotiating and to figure out if we could do better. And right now, we have a possibility of doing better. The same cost of 5 police officers, we could bring on 9 dispatchers. Actually, not only can we bring back 9 dispatchers, but the same cost of the dispatchers would include overtime for dispatchers, which means that when 9 police officers are no longer doing dispatch, There are also no other officers that have to come in and fill in for the dispatchers. And they're doing it obviously at a significantly lower cost because 9 dispatchers plus their overtime is the same amount of money as 5 police officers. So this is something that I'm looking to implement in the city. Probably sometime towards the end of this fiscal year, early next fiscal year, when we see the bulk of the retirements happen. And then you'll see that this cost is carried out over the next 5-year budget projection. So I think if you have any questions on that, this is something that we had been in discussions with, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about that now.
Thank you. Before we go forward, Madam Mayor, I would like to comment on your first item, the building that is now going to hopefully become an assisted living facility. I'd like to thank State Representative Dina Talley, Senator Flanagan, and Congressman Oliver. All 3 of them have been active over the last couple of years working with the state and the federal government to secure funding to get that building back online, and that's a good thing for the city of Fitchburg. Any questions for the mayor before we move on to the reorg? Okay, we'll move on to the reorganization. Madam Mayor?
We have a number of people in the room with me. Our Human Resources Director, Bernie Stevens, 3 department heads who are an active part of the reorganization efforts, our Board of Health Director, Steve Curry, our DPW Commissioner, Lenny Laxo, and our Director of Finance and Administration, Brian Doheny, and Larry Casassa is also here today. So we have presented parts of the reorganization before. Bernie, did you pass those out? Okay, Bernie will be passing this out. We had passed a packet out during the first time that we presented the reorganization. What is being presented to you now are some additional job descriptions that have been requested by city councilors, as well as a revision of the flow charts. There was comments from councilors such as the city council and the city clerk weren't denoted on the chart, so we have that. Before it was just the executive branch, but now we have both branches of government here. And we've also included a copy of the ordinance amending the code of the city, which I almost forgot about you, Mike, but Mike was instrumental in helping to draft that ordinance. So there's a few different ways that we can go about this. There are...
If I could, Madam Mayor, since the councilors requested this, I think it would be best for them to ask questions and for you and your staff to answer them to the best of your ability, if that works for you.
Sure.
Councilors, we had requested the mayor and folks be here and available to answer questions regarding the reorganization. Councilor Caddy.
This is 30 pages long, 32 pages long. Can we take an hour recess? We'll review this, and then we can ask some questions.
We could take an hour recess to do that, or we could take time and do it tomorrow night before we start if people want to come in early, or we can start tomorrow night and do this, if councilors are uncomfortable receiving this and asking questions. Councilor Starr.
If it would please the other councilors, I like the idea of getting a chance to go through this, sleep on it tonight, and possibly starting earlier tomorrow, if at all possible.
Do the councils wish to start earlier than our scheduled...
Do that 48 hours.
You have to post it.
Christ.
Right.
Oh, sorry, councilors, because of the open meeting law, we could not discuss this because it's not on the agenda for tomorrow evening?
No, you can't.
Start
You
early.
can't.
Oh, you
You'd
can't
have to
start earlier?
re-advertise it.
Okay, but we can discuss it tomorrow night. We would just have to start at our regular time. Okay, so we will start it, unless there's objection from the council, we will start at our regular time tomorrow night. We will have a discussion about the reorganization, and then we will move into the wrap-up of the budget. Madam Mayor.
Counselor, if I could just make a few remarks prior to you sleeping on this. Even though it's 30 pages, there is actually not a significant amount of difference from the packet that you received before. So it might be helpful for me to go over in less than a minute the changes between the packet that you received before and the packet that you receive right now, because there really isn't that much difference. So the first difference is that this includes, 2 of the pages are the ordinance that you have previously received. We just included it there for your convenience. The 4th page is the same. The 5th and the 6th and the 7th pages are pages that you have seen before. The only amendments we made on that were things that had been recommended by the council, such as adding the city council and the city clerk. So again, no significant changes. Pages 8 through 32, these are a compilation of job descriptions. I know the council has made many, many decisions before impacting staff without having to look at job descriptions. Many of these job descriptions are of existing staff that have been here for decades or even centuries. So we're just providing you now with the job descriptions. That shouldn't significantly impact the changes in the ordinance or in the org chart or in anything we provided you. Those are just simply FYI, as had been asked by the council. The specific areas that the council wanted to know about, and we have the staff here to answer that. You specifically wanted to know what the job description was for the Board of Health Director. He is here, and he can go over that now. You specifically wanted to know what the business manager would be doing. Both the DPW Commissioner and the business manager are here, or the future business manager are here to answer those questions. And you specifically had questions about the new positions under the Director of Finance Administration's job, and he is here right now. So those are really the changes. They can actually go over that, and you can also, of course, ask additional questions tomorrow.
Councilor Joseph.
I guess I know what I want to say about this and what I've been thinking about tonight's discussion, and it's not going to change tonight or tomorrow, so I'll throw it out there for people to think about overnight if that's what they wish to do. When I look at the budget and I look at the fact that we were provided a balanced budget, I guess the executive branch is here to tell us what the budget is and how that process is going to play out. And as a legislative branch, we look at it to determine whether or not the budget is right, and all the numbers. I know there's some numbers in wrong columns and things like that, but overall, we were provided a balanced budget. Okay? My only difficulties with the budget are with the document that we have in front of us, the reorganization. And that's why I'm having a hard time determining, do we have a budget that's passable, or is because the reorganization is tied into the budget, does that make it a non-passable item? My main concern, if you look at page 6 of the reorganization of the chart, you have the finance and administrative person. I guess we could go actually to page 7. The chief financial officer. That's one person. That one person is in charge of 7 departments. That person was hired for what is directly below that person, the treasurer, collector, assistant treasurer, payroll, insurance, bookkeeper, and principal clerk. Okay? And now I know that we've done some reorganization and basically taken some people off of the mayor's org chart so that she doesn't have as many direct reports. But in this area, I think that we have made some problems because now one person that was responsible for tax collector, treasurer, which is something that we've consistently have to monitor and is an important part of the city, because we're looking at back taxes, we're looking at property that needs to be sold, and all of the different things that we've asked the treasurer-collector to do when he was just the treasurer-collector, Bruce Richards or whoever it was in the past. Now that person is expected to be able to manage all of the functions that are on that line. And I know that they always had parking control, but that person never had informational services. That person never had the auditor's office, the assessor's board, purchasing. And now, on top of all of those things that we've had added to him last year, this year we're adding grants, coordinators, community development administrator. So I have a problem with one person in the org chart being that much responsible for the operations of the city, mainly for whatever happens to him or what would happen to that department if one of those areas in that department are not performing properly. And it shouldn't be a reflection on the treasurer, because the treasurer tax collector that we have currently was hired as the treasurer tax collector. If you look at page 6 again on the report that we got, we have the Public Works person, and Public Works, again, engineering, planning, parks, cemeteries, wastewater, water, streets, public buildings, and now on top of that with another one of these complex matrices that we got tonight. Or maybe it's not in this one because it was, oh yeah, here it is. Page 12, we've added a new position of a business manager and a wastewater commissioner, and also given him responsibility for the managing of grants and other items that are in CDBG. And the third one, again, that bothers me just about as much is the Board of Health. Now, the Board of Health is normally under the purview of the Health Board. It's an appointed board that's a state-regulated board that says what the Board of Health is supposed to be responsible for. But on top of the current responsibilities that he has to do with public health, and I think that we saw in the last year with the problems that we had with the N1, the swine flu, that department can get swamped really quickly by one public outbreak of a specific problem. And now on top of what he has to do for the health department, which is what he was hired for, he's got to make sure that he also has to take care of housing, building department, and those aren't things that he's an expert in. And so if somebody in that department has a problem, and I believe that the housing, the building department is all regulated by state mandate, and that person really only reports from here to the state when it comes to building code enforcements and building code issues. So I guess my issue, we can discuss it tomorrow night, but I give you something to chew on, is that these people are doing things that they're not, they weren't hired for. Yeah, it works great when you're in public, and you're in a private company where the CEO can say, yeah, you're now in charge of this, and you're now in charge of that. But when it comes to a municipality, those people have some pretty specific responsibilities that they are ultimately responsible for. Mr. Saracen has his responsibilities. Mr. Caputi has his responsibilities. Now we've wrapped them all up into being Mr. Donaghy's, let's go through that again, Donaghy's responsibilities. To me, it just is way too convoluted, and maybe it's not a matter of changing the structure of what we're doing for reporting, but maybe you need to add more people to your staff that you had, so that these people aren't responsible for all of the activities that you've given them to be. Just my opinion, these organizational charts are way too complex for the 3 people that you have administering them. And it's not a reflection on their ability to do the job, because I have the utmost confidence that, given this responsibility, they will do this job, but at what cost to their health and what cost to the city if all of these jobs aren't done at 100%.
Madam Mayor?
Let me first say that things were not working 3 years ago. They weren't working. You could see the bond rating, and you could see all the reports talking about lack of planning, lack of planning, lack of planning. So each division that you talk about, for example, you use Mr. Saracen and Mr. Caputi, those divisions don't change. Those are still working as well as they were before. Here's the difference. So each of those divisions you're talking about, and I'll just use Mr. Donahue, those were all cogs in a wheel. But one cog was over here, and one cog was over here, and one cog was over here, and one cog is over here. And what you're suggesting, and this is the first time I've heard concrete suggestions for an addition or a minus or a change in this reorganization plan, is, well, instead of giving them additional duties, you should add additional staff to the mayor's office. Well, this reorganization not only makes things work better, but it also has over $400,000 in reduced staff, which is what we needed to do. We have less money, and we want to do things better. And by adding to the mayor's staff, you're going to say, well, the mayor is going to continuously look at these 22 cogs, and for every single project, try and pull them all together. What this does is it says that, you know what, we had all these cogs who were in the finance department. Well, guess what? The city was tanking financially. So think of a watch. And all those pieces, they aren't really doing anything. They might be rotating, but they're not turning time in the way that it should. What these do is they put like-minded organizations that are supposed to be working seamlessly together. And when those cogs are together, we've actually been able to eliminate cost, eliminate staff, and achieve positive results. So what, for example, Mr. Donnie has to do, or what our departments have to do because of this, is actually think about outcomes. So not just how the sausage is being made within the divisions. I think you can see Mr. Caputi's doing a great job. You can see that Mr. Saracen is doing a great job. But somebody has to be in charge of making sure that all those cogs in the wheel are working together. And the finance team, which is made up of those 3, you can see that there have been positive results to the city. The block grant that you feel very strongly about, block grant is, I hate to say this, it's only $1 million a year. Yes, it's $1 million that we want to see and keep, but it's not enough to address the housing issue, the foreclosure, the blight, the sanitary code issues, all of that stuff in the city. Because that's another area in which there was a cog over here, and there was a cog over here, and there was a cog over there. And all those cogs were maybe, protecting themselves and doing a great job, but they were by themselves and not working together. So to have a board of housing, health, and inspectional services, as mentioned in the ordinance, we're going to have a department that is responsible for what the city is like, the health of the city. And the health of the city includes sanitary codes, inspectional services, and housing. Those are the building blocks that make up the city. And we're going to see a department with actual goals towards catching up and making sure that the city continues to have more houses fixed than houses that are blighted or foreclosed upon. And that might not necessarily mean that we have more employees or that we do more work. It just means that we are going to act smarter and more sophisticated and actually figure out what things that we can do, not by, let's say, advocating for a quadrupling of block grant, but by trying to figure out what we can do to keep people in foreclosed homes or to have a lot of people invest here. So if our grants can only address maybe 20 properties at a time, what if we did something that didn't cost anything, but just sent a signal that enabled 200 people to invest in their home? So these are 200 properties every year that we don't have to address. That is catching up, and that's what we need to do. The way that things were working before, They weren't working, and we could see that in reports like the bond rating. So this reorganization is bringing all those cogs together, and yes, that does provide additional work for certain department heads, but I'm hoping that that additional work is because people are working together, and that, yes, they have less resources, but they're actually getting more done. So that when we do have more resources, we know that when we can add to these departments, we can actually then see the added value of each of these individuals that we bring on board. And those are future discussions I look forward to have.
Councilors, before we go forward, we had a request about postponing till tomorrow evening. It was not in the form of a motion. Then Councilor Joseph asked to ask a question, which I allowed, and he did, and the mayor has responded. Now other councilors have raised their hands. I just want to get a consensus here. If people are not happy with discussing it tonight, somebody needs to make a motion and see if the majority of the councilors are in agreement, and if they are, we'll discuss it tomorrow night. If they're not, we will continue to discuss this evening. Councilor Connery.
I'll make a motion that we postpone further discussion until tomorrow evening.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone further discussion regarding the reorganization until tomorrow evening. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Why, is all I'm asking. Why are we postponing this? The mayor just said that nothing really big has changed, and we're going to walk away now after what we just heard? I don't want to. I'm cocked and loaded right now. I'm ready to go with this. Okay? I looked at the package we got before, and the mayor's right. There aren't that big of a change in this. So let's not postpone it. Let's deal with it now. I'll tell you what, for me personally, I can't go home right now after what I just heard. I can't. I can't let that go, what we just heard. I'm going to vote against postponing it. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second to postpone the discussion regarding the reorganization until tomorrow evening. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? 4 in opposition. The motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion and a second to adjourn.